I think people connect to your authentic self, and people want to know about, the entire you. I want to know if you had obstacles and challenges and how did you overcome those. We want to celebrate you, everything about you. And if you, don't let those shortcomings or don't let those obstacles make your entire story, but I think they're part of those stories. And so don't be afraid to tell those types of stories as well.
We are surrounded by content. Content shapes who we follow, how we lead, what we buy, and even what we believe. Welcome to the Content Generation Podcast, a class intercom production where we focus on the stories that come to life in schools all over the world. We highlight the students, educators, and communities who share the content that shapes our future. Well, welcome back to another season of the Content Generation Podcast. I'm the host, Ben, and I am here with Dr. Jill. Dr. Jill, we are back into another season, another school year. How do you feel?
Fantastic. I tell you what, this is my favorite time of year. And although I'm not supervising football games and high-fiving kids in the hallway, it's just a really amazing time of year. And I know parents, students, teachers, administrators, everybody's just excited to get back in the groove.
For sure. I know we've been traveling to a lot of different locations. We've been making connections with a lot of different school districts, which has been fun as a summer activity. But now we're into that flow, and it's really fun to hear about being back in classrooms, having students back. The energy that comes with that is fantastic. And this week's guest highlighted that, actually. Heidi Vega is the new president of NSPRA this year. And one of the things she shared about was how she has to go back to that motivation of being around students, especially on a bad day.
Mm-hmm. Well, their energy is palpable. I mean, we can say whatever we want about kids. And I was a high school teacher and administrator, but teenagers are fabulous. We know kindergartners are awesome, everyone in between, but their energy really is contagious, and they're wanting to learn. They want to be creative. It's just all the same. It's hard not to be smiling when you're around them.
Well, I'm excited for what Heidi is really bringing to school communicators all across the country, because what she talks about here, and I know what she lives, is that of an authentic storyteller and an authentic leader. And I think that's a valuable voice.
She has such a unique story. And, we've been blessed to really develop true friendships with the leaders at NSPRA and the past presidents. And they each fill a really special role and a special need within that really growing organization. And I have no doubt that Heidi is going to really make this her own and have a huge impact this year.
Well, with that, let's listen to Heidi. Well, welcome, Heidi. It is great to have you on the podcast. We've known each other for a couple of years and kind of bounced around through President's Summit and some of those things. But it's really exciting to have you at the helm of NSPRA this year. You just became the president just a month or so ago.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to start this year. And just do my best and ensure that I'm able to engage and visit with members as much as I can.
Awesome. Well, it's exciting to have you there, but I think for a lot of us, we'd love to hear a little bit about the journey and how your career's developed. So, how did you end up getting into school PR? Like, what did that journey look like for you?
Well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, but I didn't know what PR was. I went to the Air Force right after high school, and I was placed when I got stationed in Korea. I was the youngest person on base at the time, and I got placed in the public affairs department. And so that's kind of where I kind of got an idea of like what PR was. It was an all-in-one type of office where it was newspaper. We worked with radio, we worked with just a variety of different communication channels. And I just kind of got an idea of like, oh, I mean, there's a career where you can do all these things. And so I came out really, loving that, but accidentally falling into that. It really wasn't my actual job. I just got placed in that office. And so when I came back out, I ended up, using my GI Bill, going back to school. And then eventually found myself in medical education, where I worked with in events and planning and so on. And I loved PR. I always thought about PR, wanting to get back into that. So I was married at the time, and my mother-in-law was a director of payroll in the Deer Valley School District. And so she gave me the opening. She said, let me connect you with our communications director. She's in public relations. She's very well known. Just that way you could at least get advice and kind of go from there. So I did that, made the connection, and I ended up interning there. I worked full time. I had a little baby at the time. And then I would go and intern 3 to 4 hours a day. And I did that for about 7 months until I finally got an opportunity to interview for a position in Deer Valley in the communications department. And then I worked my way up, grant specialist to media specialist. And then eventually I became the communications director. And I had been there for 7 years. And it was just, it was definitely a journey. It was a K-12, one of the largest school districts. And I mean, we did everything. And I miss it. I sometimes miss it. It's a different thing that we do here now. We're statewide here at the School Boards Association, but there's nothing like school PR.
Yeah, what did you miss about being on the ground and making the content that got shared, or the sort of like that instant reaction? Like what do you miss from that?
I think I miss, and I think any school PR person will tell you this, I miss the students most of all. I mean, if I were to have a bad day, because I think a lot of us, can understand and can relate to this, but, being in a big K-12 district, your life becomes, all school crisis, emergency crisis, and a lot of media relations and so on. And so sometimes we forget the day-to-day things that, that are purposeful, like going in and just taking pictures of kindergartners or reading a book to first graders or so on. And so those are the things that I miss now. I get to do similar things now statewide, and we work with, 225 school districts. So that's awesome. But I just miss those day-to-day things and seeing kids.
Yeah. Did you ever sort of escape to the kids where
Definitely.
you were like,
that was definitely one of my escapes. Even the little things like, going out, sometimes the teachers would, the marketing teachers at different high schools would, ask you to come and present, your journey and present on this or that. And I mean, those were the things that I just loved. I mean, I love to do that and just, work and connect with, students and, show them that there's other opportunities out there. So that definitely is something that's always been close to my heart.
I love that. I've heard that from a number of school PR folks. We call it hot comms sometimes, but you sort of like have those stories or those moments or those days when things weren't good, and you have to remind yourself why you're there.
Definitely.
Yeah. So a journey from Air Force into a school district with some schooling in along the way led you to some different perspectives. And Deer Valley is kind of known for the airport being there, sort of like a sort of north part of Phoenix, right?
Right.
So you kind of have a little bit of a unique geography there as far as Arizona goes. How did that play into your school PR journey, having a background of service?
I think when you go into the service, you learn your chain of command, and you're all about structures and processes and systems. And so I think that was one thing that I was definitely blessed to have, and coming into a district like Deer Valley, they were an accredited Malcolm Baldrige district. And so systems and processes were really big. Data-driven decision-making. So I think those skills helped me. And then I was able just to build on those skills. And so I would say coincidentally, when I went to get I did my accreditation, my APR accreditation about a year and a half ago, it was the exact same thing. It was all about, systems and processes and your RPI. And so I've just always been blessed to have, those types of skills attained in any workforce that I've been through. So I think that was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me that really, I think, helped me bring value to the district. That was one of them. I think another one too, and I think many districts are like this. Deer Valley it's 367 square miles, and it's huge. And there's a variety of different types of communities out there, and the demographic is very different. Whether it is, if you want to look at it by race and ethnicity, you want to look at it by, education attainment, you want to look at it by like languages that are spoken and so on. And so you really get an idea when you're working in a very diverse, large district like that to really understand the different people that are part of that community and begin to find ways to not only connect but engage with those people.
How did you find ways to unify a district that large? In making like one communication, right? But like you have to represent so many different backgrounds. Like, what's the secret sauce? How did that work out?
I don't think there's a secret sauce. I think, that comes with time and experience. I think for me, at the time I was the only Latina or Hispanic director. There had never been a Hispanic director there in Deer Valley at the time. So I think really bringing that to the leadership table, having a seat at the leadership table, and ensuring that I had a seat there, I think is important for a lot of PR people that may not have that direct correlation to their superintendent. And then being able to go out and, and connect with your principals, being able to go and bring value to them, having them understand, what is it that they're marketing? What is it that they're, how are they engaging in community and communicating with their communities? And just asking certain questions like, what are the languages spoken? What are ways that you can engage with these people? At the time, those questions weren't being asked. And so I think sometimes you just need to be able to ask those simple questions. Some people, I think, are afraid of that.
Yeah. You've been able to bring a different perspective to NSPRA as well. You mentioned being a Latina in this community, and now you're the first Latina to represent NSPRA as the president as well, correct?
Correct.
Yes. And I appreciated, can you share a little bit of your video that you shared at NSPRA when you were inducted?
There's so many parts to it. I think one of my goals in my message, for those that don't know, I had a tragic death in my family, and so I couldn't make it. But I really wanted to ensure that I was there in spirit. And I had served on the board for NSPRA as a diversity engagement VP, and I think at the time leadership just wasn't ready to have those conversations about equity. And so that really kind of gave me an understanding of like, what was the type of work that we needed to do at NSPRA. And I had, board colleagues that were just so amazing. And, we worked together as a team to move some of this work forward. And so I think that's one thing in the video that I really wanted to communicate is that I was thankful for that because, we all have our own, narrative. And I learned early on that I could change my narrative. And so I think we all have that power to do that. And, you're the one that gets to write your own narrative. It's your story. And I think for me, one of the most important things that I had to learn, and again, it took a lot of time and experience, was that I had to stop trying to fit into a box that wasn't made for me. And now I know that I don't need to fit into a box. I just need to be my authentic self. But again, I had to be comfortable with who I am and who I wanted to be and who I continue to want to be. And so I think for me, it's all about courageous and authentic leadership. And so that's really what I tried to communicate in my video. And then representation, that's important. I think for me, as a young individual, I had never really seen a teacher that looked like me or came from my neighborhood. I had never been coached by anyone that understood my perspective. And in the video, I talk about my, my drama teacher, my theater teacher, who always, made me enunciate my words because she said my accent was too thick and so on. But, now, 20, 30 years later, I think about it and I'm like, well, now I'm here. I am at ASBA, and I'm doing work, videography work, and we have to record ourselves and we have to script it and so on. So, working on those things that, a long time ago might have been obstacles or challenges, I think for me, but I've been able to overcome those. And so I think that's important that we all, begin to think about that and begin to be able to talk about it, and I talked in the video about, Selena Quintanilla, Bidi Bidi Bam Bam. That's a big deal for me. She was one of the first people I saw on TV that, grew up like me. She spoke like me, and she looked like me. And so I continue, to always start with that is, people want to feel represented, and they want to be able to connect with you, and those things matter.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful example, and I love the way you described authentic leadership being so important through that whole journey, and the team that you had. You also shared a quote from Selena. Can you share that?
Yeah, so she talks about, I talked about in the video, when Selena first went to Mexico, the reporters and the concert promoters, everyone thought that she spoke Spanish because she sang in Spanish. No one really knew that she didn't speak Spanish. And we call it Spanglish, where you speak Spanish and English mixed together. And that's how we grew up. That's how I grew up. And so she goes to her first press conference where she has her interviews with all the Mexican paparazzi, and they're asking her in Spanish, Selena, how do you feel to be here in Mexico? And she doesn't know what to say because she can't think of the word. So she says, pues me siento muy excited. And everyone just starts laughing. And I love that because, she wasn't afraid to be herself, and she was accepted for that. And I think that we need to be, more open to that and accept people for who they are, and appreciate that.
And I like the way that you framed that in authentic leadership, because for a lot of people, we get sort of caught cross-generationally or where we sort of are speaking two different languages at the same time. And I think it's wonderful perspective for school PR, because sometimes the sort of right in the middle of speaking two languages partially is actually where we fit, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I loved the way you talked about that resonating with you, and just thinking about what that means to the school PR community. Now that I look at those two things you've really shared, right? If we think of, hey, how do we bring up what is a blend there, and then also bringing together all of these processes. That's part of what's led you to really having such a huge impact, is that now you're working with, you said 200 plus school districts in your current role, and then of course with NSPRA, nationwide. But tell me how that impact is starting to settle with you, realizing that you're connecting with so many communicators across the country, and even some in the world.
Yeah, I think it's not new, serving on the board, but I think what's different now is times are different, and I think that sometimes can impact what people want to talk about. I think for me, I'm, by no means am I, the guru of anything. But I am comfortable talking about, courageous leadership. And I am comfortable talking about, not only the type of leader I want to be, but the type of leader that I don't want to be, and those types of things. And I think those are the initiatives and examples that, sometimes we just don't get. We tend to just kind of do what we've been told or do what we've learned. And so nobody really talks about, the things that, that you can be, or that if you want to do something, then do it. And I think for NSPRA specifically, when I came to NSPRA years ago, a lot of people didn't look like me, and so it was different. And so some people might say, oh, well, why does that matter? Well, sometimes it does, because you want to connect with people that understand where you're coming from. And so, I think we've had those courageous conversations over the years, and I think that NSPRA has just come a long way. But it's taken 90 years for somebody that looks like me to be president. And so some people might say, well, gosh, that surprised me. But I think for people like me, it's like, well, it really doesn't, because it starts with, student achievement and education attainment. And, when you are looking at that and you're breaking that data down, who are the kids that are really going to college, who have those opportunities, because research indicates if you have those opportunities that you are going to be more successful, thus effective in the world, in our society. So So I think it's just a good way to make that connection that, we here in communications and PR, we not only tell the stories of our students and people in our community, but, we write those stories as well.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think there's sometimes lost in the mix of school PR is that personally you have such an impact. I love that example. Cool. Where do you think, during your tenure as president of NSPRA, you've broken down some walls in that way, but you've really sort of shaped some conversations and created some bridges already that are amazing. Where do you see it going in this next year?
Well, I see it going forward. That's what I always say. I was like, you got to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And so, I don't really have, expectations. I think for me, I'm excited about it. At first, I was a little afraid. And when I think about it, I think I have allowed myself to get nervous or to feel like I'm not going to exceed someone's expectations. But, I've had to take some time out to think about, there's no need to exceed any types of expectations, as long as you're yourself. And you want to keep moving forward and you want to keep, this conversation alive. I think, people only welcome that. Right. And I think for me, my theme is about, moving forward and, talking about leadership, because you can lead at any level. And you don't have to be, a director. You don't have to be a manager. I mean, there's plenty of directors or managers that people don't want to follow, but people might follow you because you're inspirational and you're the one that, brings people together. You're the one that, leads by example and so on. And so I think that's important to have those conversations and to talk about that to everybody, every member at NSPRA, because not everybody is a director or, not everybody's going to have those professional development opportunities and so on. So I think that's important. I want to ensure that people are able to connect with me at whatever level they're at.
Love that. So that authentic message sounds like your encouragement and your challenge to the rest of the NSPRA community is that it needs to be authentic, but also you need to step up as leaders in a lot of ways.
Definitely.
Love it. Anything you'd like to leave some of the listeners? A lot of the listeners to our podcast are content creators, and they're challenging other people to become content creators. So those could be, people in school PR. They could be educators as well. What would be your challenge to people in the way that they make content to be exercising that authenticity and leadership?
I would definitely say don't be afraid to tell those stories. Sometimes we want to tell the good stories, the positive stories about, the teacher, the student, the principal or, the superintendent. But I think people connect to your authentic self and people want to know about, the entire you, not just the great things that happen, but I want to know your journey. Like, I want to know what happened to you. I want to know how'd you get here. I want to know if you had obstacles and challenges and how did you overcome those? Because I feel when we're more real with our community, we're telling those stories and saying, for example, my father was incarcerated for 15 years. And no one knows that about me. And I think people might think something differently if they were to know that. They don't know that I grew up in the projects. But I think those are the types of things that don't be afraid to talk about those things because they've made you who you are. And I think that you can correlate that to, students and teachers and people in your community. Like, we want to celebrate you, everything about you. And if you, don't let those shortcomings or don't let those obstacles make your entire story, but I think they're part of those stories. And so don't be afraid to tell those types of stories as well.
I love that. I love that you're wearing that as well as as an opportunity to share. So some of that family background, right, that sometimes we shy away from.
Definitely.
That's great. That's great. So have you shared some of those stories with NSPRA already?
No, I've only shared them with you, Ben.
Oh, so as we think about that story and your unique story and what you've overcome, how did that shape how you think about these students that have to communicate about their families and they're bringing some of that into the school?
I think every district's different. And I'll give you an example. Here in Arizona, we have about 225 school districts, and they're so
Yeah.
diverse. Most people think that we're urban, metropolitan. Most of our districts are either rural or they're small. And
Yeah.
small and rural is a totally different, world than, metropolitan or urban. And then we also have a lot of reservation districts where districts are located on indigenous lands. That's a whole nother can of worms where students are being bused, to and from districts, and it takes 2 hours just to get there. We have districts that are, in the surrounding border areas where kids are crossing the border at 5 or 6 years old, going to kindergarten. And so, understanding your community and understanding your entire state, and then being able to tell those specific stories. It's not an all fit one. It's not a one size fits all type of thing here. And that's what we've done here at ASPA is we go out and we cover different districts all over the state of Arizona. And we try to go out once a month and we visit them. We've, been on indigenous lands. We've learned that, educators have to live on the reservations. They get housing there. We visited, the border towns where we've seen kids, crossing the border and understanding like what that looks like and how that, how does that happen, and so on. And so I think you really got to do the work and you really got to understand those different communities in order to tell those stories.
I've over the last few years gotten to share with my my alma mater, my school district that I grew up in, and Mitch, who leads their communications, spoke at NSPRA, and they're just a fantastic example. I joke around the office that they're the best school district in the entire country, and they're an incredibly diverse school district with racially, economically, and it's amazing as you talk about some of the shortcomings you've come up with because there's a perception sometimes, right? And so when someone knows a school district, they sort of might put a label on you because of that school district. And the way that you've sort of shared some about your family's background, you put a couple labels out there. And I think it's really important the way that you're thinking about overcoming those labels and saying that actually is part of who you are. And I think that's really fun to hear that part of your story.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Heidi, thank you for sharing. Anything you'd like to leave with listeners today?
No, I just want to say, I can't wait to come out and engage with your state. And if I do, I promise you it's going to be a good time.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the podcast, Heidi. It's so great to hear more of your story.
Thank you, Ben. Me siento muy excited to be here.
I love it.